Hello guys and welcome back to another episode. These days we'd like to think that we can head anywhere in the world armed with a board bag and an iPhone full of Google Maps pins and go and chase waves off our own accord, but unfortunately this just isn't the case. So in today's video we're going to take a look at places around the world where surfing is illegal. First up, we head to Cuba. Now, surfing is still illegal in Cuba even today, and it has been for decades. Now, Cuba has long been, and still is today, a socialist state, and in the mid-90s, the Cuban government banned all water sports, including surfing, in an effort to prevent people fleeing to the United States across the water. Sounds quite drastic, but you know, the authoritarian government, like the same sort of thing you have in North Korea and I guess how China used to be, does crazy things like this to basically stop its people escaping. And there are waves in Cuba, and there is a budding surf community. So while surfing is a very, very underground subculture in Cuba, the government is starting to recognise surfing as a legitimate pursuit, and things may change in the future, but as of today, surfers can still be arrested for riding waves in Cuba, and there are a few surfers in the country that do go and surf, but they're always sort of looking over their shoulder at the police, and they can be arrested and jailed for riding waves, which is insane. If you want to find out more about surfing, or the lack thereof, in Cuba, check out the Havana Libre documentary, which goes into way more detail about what this underground surf scene is like there. Next up, we head to Reunion Island. Now, Reunion Island is a weird one because surfing isn't technically illegal, but there are some really strict restrictions. And this isn't due to the government imposing these crazy bans like North Korea or Cuba. You know, it's part of France, so it's a very Western, liberal country. But the reason surfing is banned in Reunion is because of sharks. Now, Reunion Island is widely regarded as one of the sharkiest, if not the sharkiest, surf destinations on the planet. You know, there's a very good reason why we don't hear too much about it. Between 2010 and 2020, there were 30 attacks on the island, 11 of which were fatal. And Reunion Island accounts for 16% of all shark attack fatalities from around the world, which is an insane statistic for such a tiny island. You know, the other countries that dominate that are huge land masses. You're talking South Africa, Brazil, Australia. And because there are so many attacks, the government sort of had to do something about it. And first of all, there was a huge cull and they went around like killing sharks. Surfing was eventually banned. And now surfing is still kind of banned around the island, but there are designated protected areas where you can surf. St. Lou, which is the famous like left-hand reef break where they used to have the CT, that's one of those areas, you know, and in these designated areas, you have to go to the beach, pay for a license on the beach to be able to surf, and that allows you to surf with the protection of free divers who are looking out for sharks. There's jet skis in the water, there's drones like doing patrols looking for shark sightings, which can then alert the surfers. All surfers have to wear like shark deterrent technology. So it's pretty crazy, and it's not that cheap to do, so it's not somewhere you can just rock up and surf off your own accord. You do have to do this. So surfing outside of these areas is banned, but you can get away with it if you really wanted to. And some surfers still do that. La jetée, which I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, is that famous like right hand like air wave that's cropped up in loads of different surf edits over the years, most notably in Geordie Smith's Bending Colours. You know, insane wave. Now there's said to be less sharks on that side of the island, but to me that looks like a terrifying place to surf. And there's definitely still sharks there. So since the introduction of the protected zones, there's been no attacks that have occurred in those areas. So I guess you could say it is working, but the ban on surfing and the whole shark scenario in Reunion has decimated the surf industry. You know, there's not really many surf camps and hostels and surf schools. There's just kind of this weird vibe to the place. If you're from Reunion or you've been there and you know a bit more behind the whole shark scenario in Reunion, please comment down below because I'd be fascinated to find out what's actually happening these days. Next up, we've got India. So surfing isn't technically illegal in India, but there are restrictions in certain places. So while around Goa and Vakala, you can go and get fun waves in these places. During certain seasons, so the monsoon season, sort of May to September, when the waves are best, There are a lot of beaches that are just closed, and the authorities do enforce the closure. So you can't just rock up, even as an experienced surfer, see a pumping beachy and go, oh, okay, I'm gonna go run out, get some waves in India. That'd be such a cool novelty. You're gonna have to get past the authorities that are literally guarding the beach.
As we stood atop sacred orange cliffs and looked down on teepees, a pair of portly middle-aged men patrolled the shoreline wielding bamboo sticks.
Most notably the Vizag area. Swimming and surfing are both banned in those areas because there's a spate of drownings and the authorities deem it just too dangerous for everyone. Obviously that doesn't take into account people's water knowledge and ocean competence. It's just an outright ban. So you can't just rock up as a foreigner who's been surfing the whole life and go and surf, even if it's really good and you're capable of it. But in other parts of India there is sort of a growing surf scene. There's the sort of surf contests happening there now. There's a governing body of surfing. It's quite a big coastline. So while there are waves, it's not really anything world class. It's just kind of fun, average waves, and it's more of a novelty of surfing in a really unique country. And the surfing scene here is largely overshadowed by Sri Lanka, which sits just to the south, which obviously has way better waves and it's the more established destination. Next up, we head to the Middle East and to Gaza. So for obvious reasons, you can't surf in Gaza right now. War is still raging in the country, and it's somewhere you'll probably never surf, and not that you'd want to surf there, especially right now. But even before the war, you can't surf in Gaza, especially as a foreigner. You can't just rock up to the Gaza Strip with your surfboard. Basically all surfboards, wetsuits, leashes, all surfboard related equipment isn't allowed into Gaza. So it's basically impossible to go there now. There's a non-profit organisation called Gaza Surf Club, which can be seen in the documentary of the same name, detailing the lives of the 30 or so surfers that do live and surf in Gaza. I mean, it feels a bit stupid talking about surfing and waves with all the other things that are going on in Gaza, but we're not obviously going to get into that on this channel. But yeah, you can see on Google Maps there's actually waves here, and if there's waves in the neighbouring Israel, going to be waves in Gaza as well. Next up, we head to North Korea, and for obvious reasons, surfing, among loads of other things, is banned in North Korea. The citizens aren't allowed to just go and, do much, to be honest. And the only way you can ever visit North Korea as a foreigner is by booking onto an organised tour, and these tours definitely don't allow any room for gallivanting off to hunt waves. And there is waves in North Korea, just a quick Google Maps check, you can see that there's potential wave setups. There's waves in Japan, there's waves in South Korea, so why wouldn't there be waves there? But when you're on these tours, you can't just go off on your own accord and go and start chasing waves. If hypothetically you did somehow get into North Korea and find yourself with the room to move around freely, which you won't, but let's say you stumbled across a beach that was absolutely firing, you still wouldn't get anywhere near the beach, because most of the beaches in North Korea are protected by the military and access to them is strictly prohibited. So there's a very good reason why this stretch of coast in this part of the world is called the Forbidden Coast, because you're literally not allowed to go there, even if it's pumping. Next up, we head to Norway, and while surfing isn't technically illegal all over Norway, there are certain parts of the country where surfing is banned, and this is because of conservation, specifically to protect the native birds that live in coastal areas. Now, there's so much raw and rugged coastline in Norway, much of it is untapped and probably unexplored. I imagine there's so many good waves there, but in these conservation areas, between October and March, when this ban is in place, you can't go surfing in a lot of these protected areas. I'm not sure how strictly it is enforced. I guess Norway strikes me as the kind of place that enforces the rules quite stringently. Please let me know if you live and surf in Norway with more story to this, like how much of the coastline is actually affected. Lastly, we head to China. So surfing isn't outright banned in China, and in fact China actually has some really fun waves. I mean, it won't be anything world class necessarily. Most notably, you've got Hainan Island, which is a tropical island with fun waves and pretty cool vibes. I've never been there, but I would love to go. But on mainland China, surfing is actually banned in quite a few places. Specifically in the Hong Kong, Shenzhen area, surfing is prohibited at public beaches in this area. And earlier this year, the Hong Kong government brought into effect a new law where anybody surfing in adverse weather and conditions can be fined with up to $500 worth of Chinese yuan and can even face jail time. You know, we all saw that crazy video years ago where there was the police or the beach authorities dragging a surfer out of the water and then sawing a huge chunk out of his surfboard. That was basically because of this rule, and the reason these rules are in place is because there were so many incidents where surfers were colliding with swimmers, lots of swimmers complained, and so surfing was just banned. I don't know if they have like the designated surf areas like we do here in the UK or in Australia, but yeah, seems like a bit of a shit show and an awful way to sort of deal with surf collisions. And to be honest, the waves aren't world class, so it's probably not worth getting stressed over, but in Hong Kong there's sort of that one beach, I think it's called Big Wave Bay, where you can surf, but all the public access beaches, you know, you can't surf. There's a few other parts of China where you can surf and sort of similar rules apply as well. So it's a pretty interesting one, a pretty weird scene, to be honest. It's one that I don't know too much about. If you've got any more info on the Chinese surf scene, please fire away in the comments. So that's a wrap of some of the places that you either can't surf or where strict restrictions are in place as to when and where you can surf. You know, in the Western world, we kind of take surfing and ocean access for granted, or at least I do. You know, we can basically just go anywhere and surf when and where we want. But these places are reminders that that's not the case for everyone. And we only have to look as far back as COVID, where surfing was basically illegal everywhere in the world. I was living in New Zealand during COVID and I was pretty close to getting arrested a couple of times for surfing. I managed to not, but yeah, that's pretty funny. And yeah, there's all these crazy incidents around the world where someone getting shot at in Costa Rica. There was like the French like helicopter blade thing. Like, it was just madness, really. So if you've got any stories of where you weren't allowed to surf during COVID, or any more info on surfing or not surfing in these places, please comment down below. It's been a pretty interesting episode. It was quite an interesting video to make, this one. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe as always. For now, it's goodbye from me, and I'll see you in the next episode.